They say approach is king. Nah, approach is queen. A peak of Summer River, a huge deep back eddy, a sliver of a spring slides out of a cool lush forest, nosed in, a gorgeous brown feeding on nymphs. Nothing else matters but that one fish spotted in the back eddy. This is my kind of summer project.
Hey everyone, Dave and Amelia Jensen, Jensen Fly Fishing, and that was actually a really cool day that day. We'd walked a lot of river miles and had some good fishing. And actually, I think it was at the end of the day, and we'd just come across the big river, and we kind of snuck all the way around, and we crossed the river, crossed all that gravel, came back down into the back eddy, and we couldn't go any further. because we got bushed out on
Yeah.
the side, and there was this little tiny spring creek, this really cold spring that was kind of just filtering down like this massively high gravel floodplain of this river, just right along the bush. And it went all the way down into this kind of sandy little bit, and you had this cold water, and lo and behold, there's this brown nosed into it about 12, 18 inches offshore. Hey?
Oh yeah, and it's so neat because we love to find those really unique fish, in those interesting spots, and that was one for us for sure. Hey, he was just nosed right in there,
Yeah.
and
I couldn't actually move the camera because
No.
if I was as small as that creek looked, it was about 3 feet wide up here, and I couldn't, with the camera, I didn't want to risk taking a step on one side of the creek, hopping across, and even sending a little plume of dirt into that creek. Because you're basically feeding that fish your scent in that situation, or a plume of dirt. And yeah, it would have been great to get the cast, all the casting and a close up of the fish with the camera, sneak through the bush and set up the really tight shot, the really cool thing. It turned out fairly well, but I couldn't. So I just kind of nosed a little bit down the slope, and then it was up to you to.
Yeah, and then it was up to me to get into good position and have good approach while doing it. And yeah, I mean, you can see me crawling along. I had to get really tight to the river's edge and that fast water, and just do the butt crawl essentially, right? Just to kind of stay as low as I could, because had I stood up, you're on an open gravel floodplain,
Totally exposed,
and you're completely exposed to that fish, right? So I just crawled into position, and I think I got about 3 rod lengths away from where that fish was cruising and nosed in and feeding, and that's where I positioned myself, stayed low. And from there, it really was just about the cast.
It was, and it was funny because being this far offshore, literally, your first cast, I thought that was one of your best casts. Because I fished there, and you put your first cast kind of over here, and to lead the fish, and
yeah, and it was just too shallow. I think at the end of the day, what happened there with that cast is, for most fish, what we've found is if you cast too shallow and you're actually drawing that fish to come too shallow, they don't want to do that, because it's kind of taking them out of their comfort zone. And they don't want to be that exposed. So quite often, they'll definitely refuse, and in some cases even spook, because it's something foreign in their environment, right? So fortunately, he didn't do that.
he just went for another feeding cycle.
Yeah, he went for another feeding cycle. And then that second cast, well, I mean,
I thought you were going to get him on that one.
Oh, talk about a long inspection, right?
Just
oh, are you going to take it? No,
what are you gonna
and
do?
you're waiting, and you're ready to set, but you don't. And so he moved off, clear refusal, and then
he stayed a little bit further out that next go around.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really did it. Well, there's 2 things. One, what the fish did was circle all the way around, and it was slower to come home, right?
Yes.
But what you did.
Yeah, exactly, was that as he was slower to come home, I was able to just lead him enough with that dry dropper, and I said, I've got to go with a dropper.
Yeah,
I mean,
you had
at
to
this
change.
point, it was like,
You're
I'm
changed.
changing up.
Yeah.
There's, I guess what we didn't mention is that truly, you always want to start out, especially on a nice, warm, hot summer day, we do start out with a dry fly. You want to see if you get a take on the dry. And no, it wasn't going to happen. So on went the dropper. Again, because he was nosing in, still fairly shallow, I didn't need to go deep. I was only about 8 inches deep.
Yep.
And, pheasant tail nymph, and I don't know, hopefully a few people pick up on it, you can actually see that nymph in the water before he comes and eats.
Exactly.
And great
Turned out to be a
filming on
pretty
your
good shot.
part.
Yeah. And then after that, I mean, really, it's amazing that, had that fish been a little bit bigger, hotter, something, it was almost getting out to the main current. Had that fish gotten into the main current, it was
over
gone.
for me,
so,
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't, again, nice fish, but not a huge size, and
Yeah.
I was able to just steer him, crank him over, make sure he wanted to go for the deeper,
he did.
faster water, but I just steered him over, and hey, landed him, and lots of fun. What a great fish for a summer
But the biggest
day.
thing was the approach. Taking
Yes.
the time. I mean, from the time we spotted it to going, okay, think it through. And, there were so many things that we could have done wrong. getting too close with the camera because I was on a, that whole camera position was on a raised bit of gravel as that river drops into the eddy. Then I could have stepped into the little trickle of water on the spring creek. You could have
Yep.
left yourself exposed.
I could have left myself exposed, and yeah, it was just absolutely critical, everything we did in order to have a chance on that fish. And the
Yeah.
thing to remember on back eddies is that that fish too will quite often, I mean, this was a different situation
Yeah,
because he
yeah.
was nosed into a creek,
Yeah.
but I keep remembering when you're fishing a back eddy that those fish are going to be facing the opposite direction and might be staring right at you.
Or
So
in this case, he could have been cycling that way and comes
Absolutely.
right to you.
Yeah.
And yeah, so all sorts of little things, but the biggest thing we have, the number one asset that we have in life is time. And if that's what we consistently say: take
Yeah.
the time, slow right down, have a good look, and see what's happening. And these are the kinds of moments that you find. Everybody says, "Well, you can't sight fish anywhere but New Zealand." Well, that's not right at all. Take the time, and you'll see little moments like this. It doesn't
Yes.
matter where you
Neat
are,
fish, yeah.
and they show up. And that's a repeating little thing about our videos and
Yes.
our mantra. Take the time in life. It's your number one asset.
Yeah.
And just
have a go.
Yeah,
Just have a go and have some fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, you guys, and give us a like or a comment. Please send your comments. We love to respond. We love to engage with you. So thanks again.
see you next week.